Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me as always. Our 8-part mini podcast series recapping the 2024 NFL Draft division by division concludes tonight with the AFC West. I will go through and share every pick that each of the four teams made, discuss the team's draft hauls collectively, what I liked, what I didn't like. I will share my favorite picks, my value picks, my questionable picks, and then I will rank the four teams' draft classes from the AFC West. If you have missed any of the previous 7 podcasts, I have went division by division. I started with the NFC, 4 podcasts dedicated to the NFC, and then the last 3 podcasts have been the AFC East, the AFC North, and then most recently was the AFC South. And tonight we conclude with the AFC West. So let's jump right into it. Starting it out, the Denver Broncos in round 1, pick 12 overall. They took Oregon quarterback Bo Nix. In the 3rd round, pick 76, they took Utah edge Jonah Ellis. In the 4th round, pick 102, they took Oregon wide receiver Troy Franklin. In the 5th round, pick 145, they took Missouri cornerback Chris Abrams-Drain. Also in the 5th round, pick 147, they took Notre Dame running back Audric Estime. In the 7th round, they had a pair of picks, 235 and 256. They took Utah wide receiver Devon Vele and South Carolina center Nick Gargiulo. Overall, I struggled with the Broncos draft a little bit. I did think they got a couple good value picks I'll get into momentarily. But again, I just didn't view Bo Nix as a guy who should be coming off the board that early. To me, this isn't all that different than when New England reached for Mac Jones, I think 15, or when Pittsburgh took Kenny Pickett, or even when the Giants all the way up at 6 took Daniel Jones. I get it. He's a good scheme fit with Sean Payton. He really is. It's one of the best marriages between prospect, scheme, coach, probably in the draft. And maybe that's enough to make it work. But I still struggle as somebody, when I think about drafting franchise quarterbacks, I want to see a path for that guy to be a top 8-ish quarterback in the National Football League. Because if you go through the last couple decades and you look for guys who have led their team to Super Bowls and won Super Bowls, how many times has it not been a guy who's in that top 8 mix? It's almost always. And usually it's even higher than that. Usually it's more top 5, top 3. Those are the guys who win. Could Bo Nix become a functional starter in the NFL? Sure, especially in this scheme, this offense. But I struggle to see a path for him to be a top 10 quarterback. So if I don't think he could be a top 10 quarterback on the likes of Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, then I struggle taking that in the 1st round. To me, that's more of a guy you take in the 2nd round, maybe becomes a good starter, you're still on the lookout. But when you take him at 12, you're kind of handing the keys to the kingdom for at least a couple years. I know teams move on faster. But that was really my that was my questionable pick. That was my questionable decision. It's why I'm kind of overall down on the Broncos draft. Because I just didn't think it was a good use of the 12th pick in the draft. But I did like some of the things they did. My favorite picks were Jonah Ellis and Troy Franklin. I really like Jonah Ellis as a 3rd round edge prospect. I think he could come in, immediate guy who could contribute and work his way potentially being a future starter. Troy Franklin, I thought he had the talent of a mid-2nd round pick. If you read the tea leaves, you probably thought that he wasn't going to go mid-2nd round anymore. But I didn't see a scenario where he was going to fall out around 3. And then you pair him with Bo Nix, they immediately have that chemistry. So I like the Jonah Ellis pick. I like the Troy Franklin pick. I think the Troy Franklin pick is tremendous value. I also think the Chris Abrams-Drain pick was really good value. He was the guy that a lot of people had in their top 100 boards. So for him to fall at a 5th round, pick 145, I thought was really good value as well. I'm not an Audric Estime guy, but I think where they took him is fine. Some people thought he was a much better prospect in the 5th round. That's where I had him. So I think he adds to the mix. We know Sean Payton likes having that tough physical guy over the years in the Saints. I think Audric Estime can play that role. If we take this to the Kansas City Chiefs, they make a small trade up in round 1 to get to pick 28. They select Texas wide receiver Xavier Worthy, the speedster. In the end of the 2nd round, at pick 60, they took BYU offensive tackle Kingsley Samataya. In the 4th round, at pick 131, they took TCU tight end Jared Wiley. In the 4th round, at pick 133, they took Washington State safety Jaden Hicks. In the 5th round, at pick 159, they took Penn State offensive lineman Hunter Nourzad. In the 6th round, at 211, they took Tennessee defensive back Kamal Haddon. And then in the 7th round, 248, they took Holy Cross offensive lineman CJ Hansen. I really like what the Chiefs did. They'd be in my top 6, top 8 favorite draft classes, especially when you take into consideration they didn't have an early pick. But I look at this, and when you look at Xavier Worthy is going to become an impactful player, I think, for this team. I think Kingsley Sumatea is going to develop into a starter sooner rather than later. I think there's a real chance Jared Wiley is the starter when Travis Kelce decides to call it a career. And in the meantime, he could be an impactful number 2 because we've seen tight end 2s for the Chiefs emerge in different spots and be effective. Jaden Hicks, I thought, was a locked-in day 2 prospect. They got a starting caliber safety at the end of the 4th round. I think Hunter Nourzad could develop into a potential starting interior offensive lineman down the line. And I like Kamal Haddon in the 6th round to be a good depth corner piece. So I like all 6 pieces. I like their first 6 picks here to potentially all be contributors. A bunch of them with real chance to develop into starters. Overall, my favorite picks was Xavier Worthy. Add that speed component. I know they signed Hollywood Brown in free agency. It's a 1-year deal. Xavier Worthy is not a one-trick pony. The guy I kept comparing him to is Hollywood Brown, who has route running chops. I love the Jaden Hicks pick. I already talked about that. And I love the Jared Wiley pick. Value picks, it's up and down the board here. I thought Jaden Hicks was going day 2. He went round 4. I thought Kamal Haddon was going to go round 4 or 5. He goes round 6. I thought there was a real chance Kingsley Sumatea could have went late round 1 or the first 10 picks in round 2. They get him all the way at the end of the 2nd round. So love what the Chiefs did. In terms of questionable decisions, I didn't see any. There wasn't this standout offensive lineman to say, oh, take that at 28 and take a wide receiver in round 2. I think the way they did it was the best approach they could have taken. If they took an offensive tackle at 28, they would have been reaching for one. So they would have reached for a tackle there, and then they would have got a lesser wide receiver talent at the end of the 2nd round if you wanted to flip-flop them. So I didn't really see anything that was questionable. One of my favorite drafts in the 2024 NFL draft. Next up, the Las Vegas Raiders. At 1st round, pick 13, they took Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. Pick 44 in the 2nd round, they took Oregon center offensive guard Jackson Powers Johnson. In the 3rd round, pick 77, they took Maryland offensive tackle DJ Glades. In the 4th round, pick 112, they took Mississippi State cornerback DeCamarion Richardson. In the 5th round, pick 148, they took Ohio State linebacker Tommy Eichenberg. In the 6th round, pick 208, they took New Hampshire running back Dylan Lobb. In the 7th round, they had a pair of picks at 223 and 229. They took Air Force safety Trey Taylor, Pittsburgh cornerback MJ Devonshire. Overall, I thought the Raiders did some interesting things. It was clear that I think they pivoted to best player available. I don't think Brock Bowers was a guy that they had circled or pegged as one, a guy who might be there, and 2, as a guy they really were in high demand for in terms of filling the need. Different regime, I know, but they just took Michael Mayer last year, early 2nd round. But I think they were smart here. They are not a team that is loaded with talent. So I think you got to play the best player available scenario. And the case could be made that Brock Bowers is a top 6 talent in this draft class. You have those 3 wide receivers we've talked plenty about in terms of Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors and, Rome Odunze. And obviously we got Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels and Drake May. But depending on what you think about those quarterbacks, and depending on how high you regard Joe Alt, you can make the case Brock Bowers is one of the 6, 7, or 8 best players in this draft class. So to get him at 13 is a really good value. It's my favorite value pick of them, but it's also just my favorite pick in general. They understand the draft idea. Don't reach for a guy. Needs are short. They fade. They change quickly. Take the guy with the highest ceiling. Take the guy with the best upside. Take the guy with the highest rank on your board, especially when you have so many holes. So I applaud them for that. My other favorite picks, I do like the Jackson Powers Johnson pick, and I like the Dylan Lobb pick. I don't know what, he's a 6th round guy, but do I see a path where Dylan Lobb could carve out a role for him behind Zamir White as that change of pace pass catching back? Yeah, I do. I think he's one of the better pass catching backs in this draft class. I think he could potentially complement Zamir White very nicely if he gets that opportunity. We'll see. It's the 6th round coming from New Hampshire. In terms of value picks, I kind of already talked about it. Brock Bowers. I put Jackson Powers Johnson there too, because there's a lot of people who thought he can go in the mid-20s, late 1st round. I didn't project him to go in my round 1, but plenty of people did. So if you're in the mix to go in those 20 range, to get it at 44, it's pretty good value. He's probably going to be asked to play guard instead of center. We'll see early on in his career anyway, so we'll see how that transitions. Could also make the case that Ohio State linebacker Tommy Eichenberg is pretty good value. Once upon a time, people thought more round 3. I think as we got closer to the draft, more people realized he was locked into day 3. But he's the type of player I think Antonio Pierce will really like. Tough, physical. Some good special teams guys, I think, in Trey Taylor and MJ Devonshire at the end of the draft as well. My most questionable decision is DJ Glaze in the 3rd round. I thought Glaze was more of a round 4, round 5 guy. I thought there were better offensive tackle prospects or just offensive lineman prospects in general at pick 77. Or I thought they could have pivoted to a different position. I thought there were some really high-level players still left. They showed the willingness to take best player available in the 1st round and maybe even the 2nd round. I have it hard, they must really like something about DJ Glaze. I wouldn't have had him anywhere near my best player available at pick 77, but they clearly did. They must like the upside, the ceiling, what he could develop into. Let's take this to the final team. Los Angeles Chargers. Jim Harbaugh in control there now. Pick 5, 1st round, they take Notre Dame offensive tackle Joe Alt. Top of the 2nd round, pick 34, they take Georgia wide receiver Ladd McConkey. 3rd round, pick 69, they take Michigan linebacker Junior Colson. 4th round, pick 105, they take Alabama defensive tackle Justin Oboigbe. In the 5th round, pick 137, they take Maryland cornerback Tarheeb Still. In the 5th round, pick 140, they take Notre Dame cornerback Cam Hart. In the 6th round, pick 181, they take Troy running back Kamani Vidal. In the 7th round, pick 225, they take USC wide receiver Brendan Rice. And the 7th round, pick 253, they take Michigan wide receiver Cornelius Johnson. Like what the Chargers did. Really good draft. Probably somewhere in the top 10-ish. My favorite picks, Ladd McConkey and Junior Colson. I think Ladd McConkey stacks in there and receives the most targets year 1. Part of that might be the lack of other wide receivers there. But he's a guy who's just going to create tremendous separation. I'm not sure we ever saw Ladd McConkey at his absolute best in college in terms of production. I think there's a real chance we see it paired with Justin Herbert there for the Chargers, even as they morph probably into a more physical power running team. Also love the Junior Colson pick. He was my favorite linebacker in the class. Kind of thought he was going to go in round 2. So for Jim Harbaugh to get one of his leaders of that Michigan defense at pick 69, he had to love it. I loved it. Thought it was pretty good value too, but I mean, it's a linebacker. So we know most of the times they do fall a little bit further than we might think. So McConkey and Colson were my favorite picks. Value picks, they had some really good value picks here. Cam Harden, round 5. I think he's got a real chance to develop into a physical starting cornerback caliber player. 5th round's going to make it a little harder for that to materialize now for sure. But I thought he was going to go round 3. If not round 3, top of the round 4. They get him in round 5. Tremendous value. I never was buying the Brendan Rice hype as a 3rd round pick. But I thought Brendan Rice was going early day 3, round 4, round 5. So for them to get him in round 7, also tremendous value. Kamani Vidal in the 6th round. So that was a solid pick. Great pass protector. Jim Harbaugh is going to love that. It'll be interesting to kind of see the opportunity he gets there. They don't have a lot there. Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins coming off of injury. There's a real chance for Kamani Vidal to step in and get a significant role in year 1. Questionable decisions. The 2 picks I probably question the most are Justin Ebigbe out of Alabama and Tarheeb Still out of Maryland, the cornerback. There were just guys I liked a little bit more there on the D-line and the cornerback position. But I do think there's one name I haven't talked about, and that's Joe Alt. He was a top tackle in this class, but I do think you could at least have the conversation. They could have taken Malik Neighbors. They could have taken Rome Odunze. Those guys are probably going to become special wide receivers, I think. If Joe Alt doesn't become a really high-end offensive tackle, it's going to look like a bad decision. But we know how Jim Harbaugh wants to build this team. He wants 2 top-notch offensive tackles. And if Joe Alt is who we think he is, he's going to have that with him and Slater. But I do think it's at least a conversation to talk about it. Now, I will say I thought it was more of a conversation, though, when it first happened, knowing that they were able to find their way to Ladd McConkey at the top of the 2nd round. That duo, I will say this, that duo was better than the duo of taking Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze at 5, and then an offensive tackle, top of the 2nd. So if you want to play that game of they wanted to get out of here with a tackle and a wide receiver with their first 2 picks, which path creates a higher ceiling? It's clearly Joe Alt and Ladd McConkey. Because you would have been taking an offensive tackle like a Patrick Paul or someone of that ilk in the top of the 2nd to pair with Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze at pick 5. McConkey's got a really high ceiling. Maybe it's not as high as Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors, but Joe Alt's ceiling compared to whatever offensive tackle was going to be sitting there top of round 2 is even a more significant difference in my eyes. Overall, I liked a lot of the team's drafts in the AFC West. My rankings were Chiefs 1. I talked about it before. They were one of my favorite drafts. Tremendous value, even though they didn't have a pick until that small trade up. The Chargers were number 2. Liked a lot of what the Chargers did. Raiders were number 3. And then Broncos, I talked a lot about the Bo Nix scenario before. They'd be number 4. So there it is, guys. My thoughts on every team in the AFC West. And that's also the conclusion of our 8-part series recapping every division, every team, what they did in the 2024 NFL Draft. If you're enjoying this content, please get over to the website, ssfootball.com. It's the fastest and easiest way to get there. For $9.99, you can still get access to all of our premium notebooks. You get the rankings notebook, Dynasty rookie rankings updated regularly, soon to be released IDP rookie rankings. After that, positional dynasty overall rankings. It has my film rankings in there. It has my Devi rankings in there. You also get the scouting notebook, thoughts on almost 100, full scouting reports on almost 100 prospects in there. from the offensive side of the ball from this draft. And then you get the draft projections notebook, and yeah, the draft is coming on, but there's thoughts on almost 400 players in there. Snapshot of how they win. Developmental areas, all their combine measurements, testing, and stuff like that. So it's the best way to support us, help us continue to do what we do here. So, on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.